What happens when Hollywood royalty meets actual royalty and the gloves come off in front of millions of viewers? The tension in Studio 1A was palpable as Cameron Diaz sat across from Meghan Markle on The View. What started as a routine interview about charity work quickly spiraled into one of the most explosive confrontations in daytime television history. Before we dive into this unbelievable clash that left the audience gasping and social media in complete meltdown, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think really triggered this heated exchange. The interview began innocently enough, with Whoopi Goldberg introducing both guests as they discussed their respective charitable foundations. Meghan, elegant in a cream-colored blazer, spoke passionately about her work with women's empowerment initiatives, while Cameron, sporting a casual yet chic denim ensemble, nodded politely from her seat. The conversation flowed smoothly for the first 10 minutes, covering topics from motherhood to philanthropy, with both women sharing warm smiles and seemingly genuine rapport. But then something shifted. It started when Joy Behar asked about the challenges of maintaining privacy in the public eye. Meghan launched into a familiar narrative about media scrutiny and the importance of controlling one's own story. Her voice carried that practiced cadence we've heard in countless interviews, each word carefully measured and delivered with royal precision. You know, Joy, I think what people don't understand is the constant pressure to be perfect. To never show vulnerability, Meghan said, her hands gesturing gracefully as she spoke. When you're in the public eye, every decision you make is scrutinized. Every outfit is analyzed, every word is dissected. It's exhausting to live under that microscope. Cameron, who had been quietly listening, suddenly leaned forward in her chair. There was something in her expression that hadn't been there moments before, a flicker of something that looked almost like irritation. She tilted her head slightly, her blonde hair catching the studio lights, and her smile seemed to tighten, just a fraction. "That's interesting, Meghan," Cameron said, her voice carrying a subtle edge that only those paying close attention would notice. "I mean, I've been in this business for over 2 decades, and I've never really felt like I needed to control my narrative. Maybe it's about how you approach the whole thing, you know." The comment hung in the air for a moment, and you could almost feel the temperature in the studio drop a few degrees. Meghan's smile faltered slightly, but she quickly recovered, her media training kicking in like a well-oiled machine. "Well, Cameron, I think everyone's experience is different," Meghan replied, her voice maintaining its measured tone but with a hint of steel creeping in. "When you're dealing with certain types of coverage, particularly when it involves your family, your children, it becomes less about personal choice and more about protection." Cameron's laugh was light, almost musical, but there was something sharp underneath it. "Oh, absolutely. Family is everything. I just think sometimes we make our own lives more complicated than they need to be. I mean, I stepped away from Hollywood for years, disappeared completely, and nobody wrote think pieces about my mental health or my relationship with my in-laws." The View hosts exchanged glances, sensing the shift in energy. Whoopi cleared her throat, perhaps trying to steer the conversation back to safer waters, but Cameron wasn't finished. "I guess what I'm saying is, there's a difference between being private and being, well, performatively private. You know what I mean?" Cameron's eyes locked with Meghan's across the table, and the challenge in her gaze was unmistakable. Meghan's composure cracked just slightly, her jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "I'm not sure I follow your distinction, Cameron. Are you suggesting that someone's desire for privacy isn't genuine?" "Not at all," Cameron replied, her voice saccharine sweet. "I'm just saying that truly private people don't usually do tell all interviews with Oprah, write memoirs, or launch media companies. That's more like strategic privacy, wouldn't you say?" The audience was dead silent now, hanging on every word. Even the usually chatty View hosts seemed frozen, unsure whether to intervene or let this dramatic moment unfold naturally. Meghan's face had gone pale, but her eyes blazed with a fire that suggested she was done playing defense. "Strategic privacy," Meghan repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. "That's a fascinating way to put it. I suppose someone who truly understands strategy would recognize it when they see it. Tell me, Cameron, how would you describe your recent return to acting? Was that strategic or just coincidental timing?" Cameron's smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, honey, I came back because I wanted to, because I missed it. Not because I needed to rehabilitate my image or prove anything to anyone. There's a difference between choosing your moment and being forced into the spotlight to set records straight. The tension was now so thick, you could cut it with a knife. Meghan shifted in her seat, her royal composure beginning to show cracks. As Cameron's words hit their mark with surgical precision, "Forced into the spotlight," Meghan said, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. "Is that what you think this is? That I'm here because I have to be, not because I choose to be?" "I think you're here because you have a story to tell," Cameron replied, her tone deceptively casual. "And that's fine. Everyone has a story. But let's not pretend this is about privacy. When you're literally sitting on national television talking about your private life, that's not privacy, Meghan. That's publicity." The words hit like a slap, and for a moment, Meghan looked genuinely stunned. The careful mask she'd worn throughout countless interviews began to slip, revealing something raw and unguarded underneath. The audience held its collective breath, sensing that they were witnessing something unprecedented, something that would be replayed and analyzed for weeks to come. Sarah N. attempted to jump in with a question about their upcoming projects. But both women ignored her completely, their attention focused entirely on each other, like two predators circling in the wild. The confrontation that was about to unfold would make television history, and everyone in that studio knew they were witnessing something extraordinary. Meghan's eyes flashed with barely contained anger as she processed Cameron's brutal assessment. The studio lights seemed to intensify the flush creeping up her neck, and her perfectly manicured hands gripped the edge of the table with white-knuckled intensity. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but laced with venom. "You know what, Cameron? I find it interesting that someone who disappeared from Hollywood for nearly a decade would have such strong opinions about how others handle their public presence," Meghan said, her accent becoming more pronounced as her composure slipped. "Perhaps the luxury of stepping away when you choose to is a privilege not everyone has." Cameron's laugh was sharp and immediate. "Oh please, Meghan, privilege. You married into one of the most privileged families on the planet. You had a platform that billions of people would kill for, and you walked away from it. So don't talk to me about not having choices." The View hosts were now visibly uncomfortable, with Whoopi making subtle hand gestures to the production team off camera. But Cameron was just getting started, and her Hollywood instincts told her this was her moment to strike. "But here's what I really don't understand," Cameron continued, her voice gaining momentum like a runaway train. "You had everything. You were living in castles, had people curtsying to you. Your wedding was watched by 2 billion people, and somehow that wasn't enough. You needed more attention, more control, more everything." Meghan's face had gone from pale to flushed, and her media training was clearly failing her in real time. "You clearly don't understand the situation at all, Cameron. You have no idea what it's like to be trapped in a system that doesn't value your voice, your opinions, your very existence as a human being." "Trapped?" Cameron's eyebrows shot up dramatically. "Trapped in palaces with tiaras and designer gowns? Trapped with access to world leaders and the ability to champion causes on a global scale? Honey, if that's trapped, then sign me up for prison." The audience was completely silent now, some covering their mouths in shock, others recording on their phones, despite the no-recording policy. Even the usually unflappable Joy Behar looked like she was to crawl under the table. Meghan's voice rose slightly, her composure cracking further. "You're oversimplifying everything, Cameron. You can't possibly understand the psychological pressure, the isolation, the feeling of having your identity stripped away, piece by piece. Identity stripped away." Cameron's voice dripped with incredulity. "Meghan, you went from being a supporting actress on a cable show to being one of the most famous women in the world. Your identity wasn't stripped away, it was upgraded to premium platinum status." The comparison to her acting career was clearly a sore spot, and Meghan's eyes blazed with fury. "I was more than just a supporting actress, Cameron. I was building a career. I had my own projects, my own voice." "Had your own voice?" Cameron pounced on the opening like a predator sensing weakness. "You mean the voice that got you exactly where you wanted to be? Because, let's be honest here, Meghan, you didn't accidentally stumble into royalty. You worked for it. You planned for it, you executed it perfectly, and now you want us to believe you were some kind of victim in your own success story?" The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just detonated. Meghan's mouth opened and closed soundlessly for a moment, clearly struggling to formulate a response that wouldn't make things worse. That's completely unfair, Meghan finally managed, her voice shaking with barely controlled emotion. You're twisting everything, making it sound like I was some kind of calculating opportunist. Cameron's smile was razor-sharp. I'm not making it sound like anything, Meghan. I'm just pointing out the facts. You dated a prince. You married a prince. You became a princess. And then, when being a princess turned out to be actual work, with actual responsibilities, you decided to monetize your royal experience instead. That's not victimhood, that's entrepreneurship. The brutality of the statement left everyone in the studio stunned. Even the camera operators seemed to freeze, unsure whether they should keep rolling or cut away from what was clearly becoming a massacre. Meghan's voice was barely above a whisper now, but it carried across the silent studio. Like a shout. How dare you? How dare you sit there and judge my life, my choices, my pain, when you know nothing about what I've been through? Pain. Cameron's voice was incredulous. Meghan, you're sitting here in designer clothes. You've got multi-million-dollar deals. With Netflix and Spotify, you live in a mansion in California, and you're talking about pain. There are people working 3 jobs just to put food on the table, and you're complaining about your life of luxury. The comparison seemed to strike something deep in Meghan, and suddenly she was leaning forward, her voice rising to match Cameron's intensity. You think money solves everything? You think luxury makes racism, okay? You think wealth cancels out the damage of having lies printed about you every single day? Racism? Cameron's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Now we're playing the race card. Meghan, I've been in this business long enough to know the difference between racism and criticism. And criticism of your actions isn't racism just because you're biracial. The statement was like throwing gasoline on a fire. Meghan's face contorted with rage, and for a moment it looked like she might actually stand up and walk off the set. The View hosts were making frantic gestures to the production team, clearly trying to figure out how to salvage what had become a complete disaster. You have no right, Meghan said, her voice shaking with fury. You have absolutely no right to dismiss my experiences with racism just because they don't fit your narrative. Cameron's response was swift and merciless. And you have no right to use racism as a shield every time someone questions your behavior. Some of us have been dealing with Hollywood politics and media scrutiny for decades without turning every criticism into a civil rights issue. The audience was now visibly uncomfortable, with some people actually getting up to leave. The tension had moved far beyond entertainment into something genuinely ugly and personal. Meghan's voice was barely controlled now, trembling with emotion. You know what, Cameron? I think this conversation says more about you than it does about me. Your jealousy is showing, and it's not a good look. Cameron's laugh was cold and cutting. Jealousy? Of what exactly? Your failed political ambitions? Your canceled podcast? Your husband's tell-all book that aired all your dirty laundry? Trust me, honey, I'm not jealous of your life. I'm just fascinated by your ability to make yourself the victim in every single story. The words hit like physical blows, and Meghan looked like she was about to completely break down on national television. The confrontation had moved far beyond a simple disagreement into something genuinely devastating, and everyone in the studio knew they were witnessing career-ending television. The silence that followed Cameron's final devastating blow was deafening. Meghan sat frozen in her chair, her face cycling through emotions like a broken television flipping channels. You could see her desperately trying to formulate a response that would somehow salvage what was left of her dignity. But Cameron had systematically destroyed every defense she could possibly mount. When Meghan finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, but the microphones picked up every trembling word. You know what, Cameron? I think I understand now why you disappeared from Hollywood for so long. It wasn't because you wanted to step away. It was because nobody wanted to work with you anymore. It was a desperate attempt at a comeback, but Cameron's response was swift and brutal. Actually, Meghan, I left because I had made enough money to do whatever I wanted for the rest of my life. I didn't need to marry my way into wealth and then complain about it on television. I earned my independence. The words hit like a sledgehammer, and Meghan's composure finally shattered completely. Tears began streaming down her face, but instead of garnering sympathy, they only seemed to fuel Cameron's relentless assault. And there it is, Cameron said, her voice filled with mock concern. The waterworks, right on cue. Because when logic fails, when arguments fall apart, when you're caught in your own contradictions, there's always tears to fall back on. Whoopi finally found her voice, desperately trying to intervene. Ladies, I think we need to take a breath here and maybe redirect this conversation, but Cameron was far from finished. No, Whoopi, I think we need to finish this conversation, because I'm tired of watching someone play victim while living a life that 99% of the world would consider a fairy tale. Meghan wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her carefully applied makeup. You're cruel, Cameron. You're just cruel. I'm honest, Cameron shot back immediately. There's a difference. And honestly, I think what bothers me most about your whole narrative is that you're taking up space that should belong to people who are actually struggling, actually oppressed, actually victimized. You're trivializing real suffering with your palace problems. The audience was now completely captivated by the carnage unfolding before them. Some were recording on their phones, others were whispering to their companions. But everyone was transfixed by what had become the most explosive daytime television moment in years. Meghan's voice was thick with tears now, but there was still fight left in her. You don't know anything about real suffering, Cameron. You've lived in a bubble your entire life, a bubble. Cameron's laugh was incredulous. Meghan, I grew up in Long Beach, worked as a model to pay for acting classes, and clawed my way up from nothing. You went to private schools, worked on a network television show, and married a prince. Between the two of us, who exactly has been living in a bubble, the comparison was devastating in its accuracy, and Meghan seemed to deflate further with each word. Joy Behar attempted to jump in with a question about their charity work, but Cameron cut her off with a raised hand. No, let me finish this thought, Cameron said, her voice now calm but deadly serious, because I think there's something important here that needs to be said. Meghan, you had everything. You had a platform that could have changed the world, influenced millions of people, made a real difference. And instead of using that power responsibly, you turned it into a personal grievance tour. Meghan's voice was barely audible now. I tried to make a difference. I tried to use my platform. You tried to use your platform to settle scores, Cameron. Corrected sharply, there's a difference between advocacy and vendetta, and you chose vendetta every single time. The studio was so quiet now that you could hear the air conditioning humming in the background. Even the production crew seemed to have stopped moving, everyone frozen by the intensity of what was unfolding. Meghan made one last desperate attempt to regain some ground. At least I'm trying to be authentic. At least I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not. Cameron's response was swift and final, authentic. Meghan, you've reinvented yourself more times than Madonna. You went from actress to humanitarian to royal to victim to entrepreneur to whatever you're trying to be today. That's not authentic. That's just confusing. The words seemed to break something inside Meghan, and she suddenly stood up from her chair, her movements shaky and uncertain. I don't have to sit here and listen to this anymore. No, you don't, Cameron agreed, her voice now almost gentle. You can walk away, just like you walked away from everything else when it got difficult. But running away won't change the fact that you had the chance to be something amazing, and you wasted it on self-pity. Meghan paused at the edge of the set, her hand on the back of her chair, looking like she wanted to say something more but couldn't find the words. The tears were flowing freely now, and her carefully constructed image had completely crumbled on live television. I hope you're happy, Meghan said finally, her voice breaking on the words. Cameron's response was quiet but audible to everyone in the studio. I am happy, Meghan. That's the difference between us. I found my happiness without needing to tear anyone else down to get it. With that, Meghan walked off the set, leaving Cameron sitting calmly in her chair as the audience sat in stunned silence. The View hosts looked like they had just witnessed a car accident, unsure whether to continue the show or cut to commercial. Cameron turned to face the camera directly, her composure completely intact. Well, that was unexpected, she said with a slight smile. But sometimes the truth is uncomfortable. And I think we all just learned something important about the difference between being famous and being significant. Whoopi finally found her voice again, though it was shaky. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by our next guest. As the cameras cut away, Cameron remained seated, looking completely unfazed by what had just transpired. she had systematically destroyed one of the most famous women in the world on live television. And she had done it with surgical precision and devastating effectiveness. The confrontation would be replayed millions of times across social media, dissected by commentators, and remembered as one of the most brutal takedowns in television history. Cameron Diaz had reminded everyone why she was one of Hollywood's most formidable personalities, and Meghan Markle had learned the hard way that some battles are better left unfought. What did you think of this incredible confrontation? Was Cameron too harsh, or did Meghan deserve every word? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more explosive celebrity encounters that you won't see anywhere else.